Good morning, everyone. It's time to read our Wings of Fire book. So let's get yourself comfy and settled so that we can enjoy chapter 15 together. But before we do that, we have to remind our brains what was happening in chapter 14. So if you remember, at the end of chapter 14, Glory and Jambu had gone and knocked on the Sandwing Castle. I'm not so sure about that choice. But anyways, they went and knocked on the door and they thought they were going to be able to hide, but they couldn't, because they said that the queen was sitting in there and was ready to meet them. So we'll have to wait and see what happens today. So go get yourself settled and we're going to start to read. Okay. Let's see. Is Blaze really going to be there? Uh-oh, Glory thought. But it better be good news, said the Sandwing, stopping around and heading into the fortress. She doesn't like hearing bad news, and we don't like her hearing it either. Queen Glacier needs to figure that out and stop sending all those gloomy reports. Glory and Jambu exchanged glances and hurried after him. The door thudded shut behind them, and another Sandwing guard followed close on their tails. Slipping away was not going to be so easy. Oh, here, let me change that for you guys. See a little bit. Sorry. Blaze's fortress was not much like the glorious, extravagant palaces of Queen Scarlet or Queen Coral. The halls were narrow and nothing was open to the sky. A fireplace held a roaring fire in every room they passed, so the heat was almost stifling, and yet cold winds still rattled through the small windows. There was no treasure adorning the walls, no gold or pearls embedded in the floor. Instead, the stone walls were hung with thick woven tapestries. Each tapestry had a bright yellow sun blazing at the center of it, surrounded by patterns of images from the desert. Lizards, prickly cacti, palm trees, camels, white and green and blue covered the dull gray walls, almost from corner to corner. They missed their home, Glory realized, and was shocked to find herself feeling sorry for these Sandwings. They'd come here to support Blaze. Probably they'd fled alongside her when Byrne tried to claim the throne. And now they were trapped in this icy world that was nothing like their own. Kind of like growing up in a cave instead of a rainforest, Glory thought. Cool, Jambu said. He pointed to a tapestry covered in green lizards. That one's really wild. I like it. The Sandwing soldier stared at him. Really? He said to the one in the lead. Our Icewing visitors usually make it pretty clear that they think our hangings are, how do you put it? Garish and gaudy. Well, they're not our style, Glory said, stamping on Jambu's foot, but we can still appreciate the artistry. Huh, said the first Sandwing. Never heard that from an Icewing before. He turned and kept walking. Glory shot Jambu a glare, and he wrinkled his snout at her. They reached the center of the fortress, or so Glory guessed, since there was no windows here, and stopped in a small antechamber outside a pair of giant wooden doors. One of the Sandwings knocked twice, and they all waited. As the silence stretched out, Glory realized that there was something huddled in the corner of the little room. It looked like a dirty pile of prey fur at first, but when she peered closer, she realized there were two scavengers in there. They leaned against the wall with their arms around each other, shivering. What are those? Jambu whispered to her, spotting them at the same time. You're one of those Icewings who's never left the Queen's palace, aren't you? Guessed the second soldier, overhearing him. I hear they rarely see scavengers that far up north. He prodded the furs with one sharp claw, and the two scavengers let out tragic little whimpers. We found one of their hidden dens near the mountains and gathered up whatever we could catch. They're faster than they look. We got only 6 of them, but there must have been at least 20. He shook his head. These 2 are what's left. You're going to eat them? Jambu said. Don't sound so shocked, Glory thought, lashing her tail. But she could understand what he was feeling. With their big eyes and strange arms wound around each other, The two scavengers looked like overgrown, less cute sloths. She couldn't imagine eating them either. The thought made her feel weirdly queasy. It didn't help that one of them was staring at her in the same plaintive way that Silver did when she didn't want Glory to leave her behind. "Of course," she said to the guard. "We wreck any scavenger dens we can find and eat as many of them as we can. Glacier's orders. She thinks one day we'll find where they buried our treasure." "If it still exists. Who knows what scavengers do with treasure," muttered the other guard. He knocked again, and this time the door swung open under his talon. The room on the other side was larger than any that they'd seen so far. The smooth stone floor was covered in sand, and the tapestries on the walls here were more intricate, with images of dragons and crowns and jewels surrounding the yellow suns. Giant wine-red pillows and camel hair carpets were piled in a loose net in the middle of the room, and sprawled across this was a strikingly beautiful sandwing. She had her chin propped up on one talon and was gazing listlessly into a mirror on the sand in front of her. Her tail coiled gracefully across the pillows, with the poisonous barb touching the floor. Her wings were folded, and her scales shimmered like white gold against the red backdrop. Blaze lifted her dark eyes and saw Glory and Jambu in the doorway. She forced a smile and reached her front talons towards them in a welcoming gesture. "Oh, wonderful," she said. "We haven't had visitors in so long. I was hoping Queen Glacier would send us news." Glory bowed and Jambu imitated her. "If this is a bad time, Your Majesty, we can wait until later." No, please come in," Blaze cried. "Octilio, please bring us some tea. Ooh, and some of those dried lizards if you have any left." "Of course, Your Majesty," said the first guard with a respectful bow. Both Sandwing soldiers backed out of the room, leaving Glory and Jambu alone with Blaze. "I'm guessing it wouldn't be this easy to get a private audience with Burner Blister," Glory thought. Blaze was not as cautious or suspicious as her sisters, but then she had no reason to suspect a pair of ice wings. "Is this about Queen Scarlet?" Blaze asked, leaning forward. "Did we find out if she's dead? Are the Skywings still following Burn? You know, if Glacier would let me go to the Sky Kingdom, I bet I could convince the Skywings to switch alliances to us. I can be really convincing. Everyone likes me." "Or they could throw you into prison," Glory thought. "Or hand you over to Burn." "I know what you'll say," Blaze said restlessly. "What Glacier always says. Stay put and let her handle things. I know all that military stuff is too confusing for me, but I think I could be useful with the talking part. Other dragons like hearing me talk." "I'm sure that is true, Your Majesty," said Glory politely. "So?" Blaze said. Her pitch dark eyes were too eerily similar to Burns and Blister's. They gave Glory the creeps, even though she knew a very different brain was behind them. "What's your important message?" Blaze asked. Option 1, make up a lie. Option 2, run for it. Option 3, tell a version of the truth. Glory took a deep breath. "The Dragonettes of the prophecy want to meet you." Blaze sat up fast. "The Dragonettes?" she cried. "Glacier found them?" "They're looking for you," Glory hedged. "Well, bring them here. Bring them here," Blaze said. "We can have a feast or a party. We haven't had one of those in forever, because, you know, Queen Glacier disapproves of that kind of thing. But for something like this, I'm sure we could. Oh, we'll definitely need more dry lizards. We even have a pair of scavengers we could share. Maybe we should roast a camel. One of them's a mudwing, right? He'd probably like that. We don't have anything for sea wings. Maybe Queen Glacier can send us some fish or a penguin. Or do you think she'd like a walrus?" "Wait," Glory said. As tempting as a feast sounded, and she knew Clay would collapse with joy if he were offered a roasted camel, she wasn't about to walk her friends back into another of the Queen's clutches. "There's a catch. They're not willing to risk coming inside. They need you to go meet with them." Blaze flung herself down on the carpets again, looking petulant. But what about my party, she said, and I don't like going outside. It's too cold and it makes my scales all dry and ugly. You won't have to go far, Glory said. Jambu was twitching in a weird, distracting way. She poked him with her tail. And it isn't worth it if the Dragonettes end up choosing you to be the next Sandwing Queen? Blaze worried one of her claws between her teeth, thinking. Jambu poked Glory back and cut his eyes towards the far corner of the room. Glory squinted, but all she could see was sand and stone walls and tapestry. Except... Then the sand moved, and for the briefest moment a pair of eyes blinked out of the wall, then vanished again. Mangrove is here. I should wait for Queen Glacier, Blaze said. She wouldn't like my going off alone. I'm sure she wants to meet the Dragonettes too. Glory already did not like the sound of the Icewing Queen. She'd bet that Glacier was exactly the kind of dragon who would love to lock up 5 Dragonettes. Actually, Glory said, she sent us to tell you that it's a good idea. You should go ahead and meet with them, and you can tell her about it afterward. There's nothing to fear from the Dragonettes. And besides, Penguin and I will be there to protect you. Oh, said Blaze, that is reassuring. She gave Jambu a concerned look, and he managed to stop twitching for a moment. Do you think they'll really choose me? Blaze asked hopefully, turning back to Glory. Oh, who am I kidding? I'm sure that when they meet me, they will. All right, I'll do it. Great, Jambu burst out. Let's go. Right now? Blaze said. Already? Glory wasn't sure if that was a good idea either. Her friends weren't exactly expecting Blaze to show up, and it would be hard to stay hidden from Deathbringer with the Sandwing parading along beside them. Still, this is what they wanted. A chance to meet the 3rd Queen candidate without risking imprisonment. Yep, right now, Glory said. She shot a significant look at Mangrove's corner, hoping he'd be smart enough to follow them out. Blaze picked up the mirror and checked her scales from several angles. Finally, she swept out of the camel hair blankets off the floor and flung it around her shoulders, like a cape, and then led the way to the door. Jambu darted to the corner, grabbed a patch of sand, which turned out to be Mangrove's elbow, and tugged him along after them. Blaze started to turn around, but Glory was there to distract her. Tell me about this tapestry, she said, pointing to the one with 2 large sand-winged dragons flying across a blue background. I don't remember seeing it before. Oh, that one was my idea, Blaze said. It's the tragic, romantic story of how my brother fell in love with a dragon he knew my mother would never approve of, so he kept her hidden from us. But then she ran off and broke his heart. Although we were all thinking, or did she, of course, because it is so likely that Mother just found out and had her killed, which was something she would totally do. Blaze chattered on about the tapestry as she swept through the antechamber. Glory glanced sideways at the 2 scavengers. The one with Silver's eyes had fallen asleep and looked even more pathetic now. Blaze was several steps ahead and not paying attention to anything but the sound of her own voice. Glory scooped up the sleeping scavenger and slid it onto her back. It did not smell very pleasant at all. No wonder the Rainwings preferred fruit. Bananas never smelled like this. She folded her wings back over, hiding it as well as she could. Jambu saw what she was doing and grabbed the other scavenger. Even though it was awake, it barely struggled as Jambu tucked it under one wing. They hurried after Blaze, following her back through the hallways to the main door. They went by a few Sandwing guards. Blaze addressed them by name and they saluted, but she didn't tell them where she was going, and none of them looked suspicious or even curious. None of them paid any attention to Glory and Jambu, or to their poorly hidden stolen goods. Almost every Sandwing they passed was injured in some way. Blaze was unscathed, but all of her soldiers had scars slicing across their scales, or they were missing talons or had wounded tails. Glory thought of Dune, their Sandwing guardian, who had been so maimed by the war that he could never fly again. It had never occurred to her to ask him which side he had fought on before he joined the Talons of Peace. A blast of cold air smacked them in their snouts as they stepped outside. Blaze wrapped her blanket around herself more tightly, lifted her claws gingerly out of the snow, and whined. Are you sure the dragonettes won't come inside? Glory glanced back at Jambu. A shimmer in the air beside him was all she could see of Mangrove, but she was relieved to know that he was there. That way, Your Majesty, she said, nodding south. Blaze heaved a sigh, spread her wings, and leaped into the air. Quickly, Glory twisted around and dragged the scavenger off her back. She dumped it on the snowy ground, and it woke up with a yelp. Jambu dropped the other one next to it. Go on, run for your scrawny lives, Glory said, poking her scavenger with her snout. The scavenger scrambled backwards, then grabbed the other one's arm, and they took off running through the snow. Do you think they'll be all right? Jambu asked, as he and Glory flew after Blaze. It's so cold out here. I bet that's what all those furs are for, Glory said. Anyways, I'd rather freeze to death than be eaten by a sandwing. Black, Jambu said. Meat eaters. I don't get it. They caught up to Blaze and steered her towards the spot where their friends were waiting. As they flew, Glory scanned the ground below them for any sign of Deathbringer. The sun was high in the sky, although it felt like it was far away behind a ceiling of ice. The frost glinted on the ground, and now Glory could see scrubby patches of brown grass and twisted shrubs. A gray wolf trotted across the rocks, but he was the only sign of life that she saw. Wherever Deathbringer was for the day, he'd hidden himself well. Her friends had done their best too. Several large boulders had been shoved together below the cliff to look like a fallen rock pile, and Glory nearly flew right over it. She circled back down to land with Jambu and Blaze behind her. Sunny was the first one out. You did it, she cried. You found him? Wait. She squinted at Blaze. Glory? That's an actual sandwing. I know. Don't worry. Mangrove is here too, Glory said, flicking her tail. It's all right to show yourself now. The rainwing slowly materialized in a dull green, unhappy color. He ducked his head and wouldn't meet her gaze. Yikes! Blaze yelped, leaping away from him. How did that happen? Hey, where did he come from? She looked around wildly as if she expected more dragons to suddenly poof out of the landscape. What do you know about rainwings, Your Majesty? Glory asked. She watched Blaze's face intently, wondering if the sandwing knew anything about the missing rainwings, and if it would show in her expression. But the potential queen looked as mystified as before. I've heard they're pretty, she said, tossing her head, but I've never seen one. You have now, Glory said. She held out her wings and let them shift to a light, non-threatening purple. At the same time, Jambu's scales shivered back to pink, although a paler, chillier pink than usual. Oh, Blaze said enviously. She reached out and took one of Jambu's wings in her talons, inspecting the scales as if he were an inanimate tapestry instead of a living dragon. Jambu blinked at Glory, but he didn't pull away. Wow, I wish I could do that, Blaze said. I'd be a different color every minute. She turned over the wings so Jambu had to contort himself into an odd position. She didn't seem alarmed or angry to have been tricked by their ice-wing disguises. Glory wasn't sure whether to admire her bravery or roll her eyes at Blaze's lack of caution. Do you think the changing camouflage would still work if I had someone make, like, a coat of rainwing scales for me? Blaze asked. That could be pretty. She eyed Jambu's scales like she was trying to figure out how to take them off of him. Mangrove finally looked up and met Glory's eyes with a worried expression. By now, Clay, Tsunami, and Starflight had all emerged from the rock pile as well. Starflight pointed at Blaze, his eyes wide. Glory! He cried. This is... You found... I know, Glory said. Everyone, this is Blaze. Blaze? These are... She hated the phrase, but it was what everyone called them. These are the Dragonettes of Destiny. And that's the end of chapter 15. So what I want you to think about now is, what word or characteristic would you describe Blaze with? So remember, a characteristic is how someone acts or behaves most of the time. So what word could you come up with? And then I want you to ask your parents, or you can send me a note on Google Classroom, and I want you to give me your characteristic for Blaze, and I'll make a class list. All right? Okay, I hope you enjoyed the story. I'll see you again tomorrow.